The issue of transformation in South African sport, particularly rugby, just will not go away. And to further discuss the matter, I'm joined in studio now by former Springbok Malotana, as well as Power FM sports anchor, Thabiso Mosia. Thanks, guys, for coming in. Really appreciate it. I'm going to start with you, Kaya. We saw there Trevor Nyakane saying that the player, or he himself saying that he just wants to get on with the job. You were in that position yourself as a former Springbok player. How difficult is it to ignore the politics and just get on with the business of playing?
It's an impossible position to put a player in. To have to be put on that spotlight and for him to have to openly and publicly admit that things are fine when everybody knows they're not. Because you've got to remember, Trevor has to think of his playing career. He's got a rugby career after the Springboks, and he happens to be in one of the unions that are also probably going to be under the microscope if these things get investigated further. So he needs to, there's an element of him protecting himself and his career against saying what really is going on at that off chance that he will be victimized, he will be sidelined, he's going to lose his bread and butter if he comes out openly and admits what's going on. So from having to put him in that position, I think is totally unfair. I think it's at a stage now where office bearers should take up the fight and allow the players the freedom to carry on developing their skill, to keep on knocking on the door and putting their hand up like they've been doing and not getting a chance.
Let's go back to 1999 when you were brought into the Springbok squad for the first time. You know, at the time there would have been people that said, oh, who's this guy, what's he doing there, etc., etc. How did you manage to deal with it? Again,
you have to focus on your ability to play the game. And, you know, there's an element of having to try to block out what the world says to a point where you stop buying newspapers. Because if you're going to read every single thing that gets written, negative and positive, you end up being confused on your own ability of playing the game. So it becomes important as a player to really try and focus on obviously serving the team and what the team needs according to what the coach wants, and also looking after your career.
Thabiso, I want to bring you in here. We live in a country where sport and politics inevitably mix. It's a unique country that we do live in, and it's going to be the case. Last week, Coach Meyer picked a Springbok starting 15 with only 3 non-white players in the run-on side. This week, there's only 4. It's not good for the image, is it?
No, it's not, especially what he's doing today, because there's a reason now that all of a sudden that there are 4 players, you know, because of the criticism and the pressure that he's been coming under in previous days and in previous weeks, like you've been saying. But I think here what's important is that we need to note the numbers also, you know, because people are not just throwing shots at Heyneke Meyer, but the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, in his first 3 years in charge here, Heyneke Meyer only gave a chance to 6 black players, basically, in the Springbok setup. And remember that SARU has its own transformation policy. That policy now works over 4-year cycles, right? So it works basically leading up towards the World Cup. So in 2015, the idea of the policy was to have at least a 30% representation in a match day 23, which means that there must be 7 players of color. And by color, loosely translated, it means Indians, coloreds, and black players, right? So now, if you look at the squad that Heyneke Meyer picked for the first match against Australia, the match day 23, he had 5 players of color, which already means that he's short by 2 players. When he picked his original squad for the Rugby Championship, he had 49 players. He had only 14 players of color, which means he was way short. Now, leading up to the World Cup, he must pick 31 players. I think 9 will make it 30%. And I think for me, that's the problem here, because he's not meeting the target set by SARU, which for me is the first problem. And it's baffling for me to see reports then this morning saying that they're considering extending his contract, because not only is he failing as far as transformation is concerned, but he's also failing on the field of play, because you said earlier on that he lost 4 matches in a row. We finished with the wooden spoon in the Rugby Championship, bottom of the log against Argentina. Absolutely unbelievable result. And I think that Heyneke Meyer is failing in that regard. He's not giving the players a chance, and he's not following SARU's transformation policy. And if you look at the starting 15, then most of the time there's only 1 black player there. And if you talk about black African exactly now, that's Piston Tawarira. Piston Tawarira is Zimbabwean. We all know that. So technically then no black South Africans playing in Heyneke Meyer's side, which raises a lot of questions. And that's why people are uneasy. And it's not that people are only starting to raise this issue now because the Springboks are losing. I was listening to a report earlier in the week where somebody was saying that maybe if the Boks had beaten Argentina, then we wouldn't be asking these questions. Remember a couple of months ago, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu raise questions. Now, if a leading figure like that can voice his concerns about the Springbok team and the selection issues, then we've got a serious problem here in South African rugby. And I think that the people in charge, the administrators and the sports minister also need to wake up now.
We heard the coach speaking there saying that he doesn't see colour. All fine and well to say that. But I'm going to throw two examples at you and then you tell me what you think. So we had a situation where Jesse Kriel was at centre and then he was moved to the wing in place of a non-white player. And then we've also seen where someone like Siya Kolisi, who's been in tremendous form in Super Rugby, you can add Thabiso Mosia's name into that as well. Nizam Kar you could add into that list as a loose trio. And these guys, all of a sudden, in spite of being part of the system, were sidelined in favour of someone like Heyneke Meyer. So given those two examples, can we really believe what the coach is saying?
And can you really call those players Springboks if they don't really get a chance? They don't get onto the field of play. They don't get to start. I mean, I saw another newspaper this morning calling Rudy Page a Springbok. You know, guys like Raymond Rule Springboks. I mean, really, those guys never got a chance to play. And I think that's where the criticism comes from. And it's justified, Peter, because if you look at, go back to Opa Mohojo, Tebogo, you know, a Free State Club Player of the Year 2013, Shimla's captain, led them to the Varsity Cup, called up to the Springboks, and then Juan Smith comes and takes his place. Juan Smith, after one match, tells us that he's not fit. Guess what happens? Opa Mohojo doesn't play the next game. Warren Whiteley is called in. It's unfortunate that we have to mention Warren Whiteley here, you know, but he was called up instead of a guy like Opa Mohojo who was there and who should have been playing. Look at guys like Siya Kolisi. He's been part of the system for a couple of years now, but he never gets to start. And I think that's where Heyneke Meyer is totally unfair, and that's where he's losing the public support, because now what's happening is that not only are the public, the fans, complaining about the Springbok selection and the makeup, but even the journalists now are coming out publicly when the Springboks are playing and saying that we're not supporting this team, we're supporting the opposition. And if you look at Heyneke Meyer's policy of bringing in the youngsters, he does back the likes of Marcel Coetzee, the likes of Andre Pollard, the likes of Vincent Koch. He got a chance, Eben Etzebeth, Peter Steph du Toit. But the same can be said about Siya Kolisi, about Skaran Tubeni, about the likes of Thabiso Mosia. And I think for me, that's the problem now. And the fact that he's willing to bring back players out of retirement to come and be part of the Springbok setup when there are so many young players, black players that are waiting for that chance. I mean, Juan de Jong, it's a sensitive issue in the Western Cape if we talk about how Juan de Jong has been snubbed here. You spoke about Jesse Kriel. Jesse Kriel is a fullback. He had to go play a centre. From centre, he was moved to the wing. I mean, how does Lionel Mapua feel? How does a guy like Lwazi Mvovo feel in that situation? And that's why people are saying that Heyneke Meyer is ignoring black players, because even though he selects them, he leaves them on the bench still. So he defeats the whole purpose.
Kai, let me bring you back in here. We heard Coach Meyer saying he doesn't see colour. Do you believe that?
Not at all. I think innately people will always trust, especially when you talk of their careers. If they have to put their career on the job and it comes to performance that is needed, you'll always trust people you are attracted to, people with the same sort of background, the same upbringing, because you know, you think you know their character, you think you know that they'll have your back any day. So to say you don't see past colour, I think it's just, obviously you can't come out publicly and say, I have difficulty trusting that Wazi is going to do the job for me, so I'd rather put Jesse Kriel on the wing. Interestingly enough, I read an article where Hougaard mentioned in an interview that there's a stage where he actually felt bad to see Lwazi's face on the bench when he has to move from scrum off to wing. So that he totally felt that that player was not being fair chance. Where's Daryl Hougaard today? He has to play Currie Cup rugby and he's not in the fold anymore. Now you can't help but think, is it because he came out and said something like that when he was supposed to keep his mouth shut? What I also found very distasteful is for the national coach to come out and say and mention white players who are dying, who are hungry for the Springbok jersey, but you won't mention Elton Jantjies, for example. Isn't Elton hungry for that jersey? Doesn't he want his chance as well? Doesn't Lionel Mapua want the chance? Doesn't, you know, okay, let's look at also the fact that he does not play select players on form. Faf de Klerk, the best scrum half in South Africa, next best thing to Aaron Smith, New Zealand scrum half. Can't select him in the team because why? Faf is not going to play according to what he wants.
Which is another story altogether. Gentlemen, stay right there. We'll continue the conversation because earlier we took to the streets to ask about transformation in rugby, and this is what the fans had to say.
It's not about black, it's not about white. Choose on merit.
Thanks,
you know what I'm saying? Choose on merit. If a black guy is good, let him be in. If a white guy is good, let him be in.
Cool, thanks, sir.
And I think that is now something good for our country. You know what I'm saying?
Cool.
Irrespective of white, black, If the guy is good, put him in.
I think it hasn't transformed. He should be picking far more. Yeah. I mean, how can you have 5 black players out of 31? It should be transformation. And I think they were thrashed because they didn't play the best team.
Definitely push, because if you look at Zane Kirshen at full-back, he hasn't played for quite a while as well. He hasn't even been on the bench, so clearly COSATU had something to do with it. I just think you should choose the best players, because I don't really think black South African rugby players are the best.
Kai Malotana, let me bring you back into it. 31 players are going to go to the Rugby World Cup. We spoke about these transformation targets. Let's assume that there are 9, maybe even 10 black players or non-white players that make up that 31. There's a really good chance that about half of them would not have had much, if not any, action in a Springbok team in this year. And then you go to the World Cup, maybe you lose, and then it's easy to turn around and say, oh, well, it was that one's fault or it was that one's fault. It's a very difficult situation, isn't it?
No, it puts players in a precarious position because you need the game time to get better. You need game time to form combinations. And to all of a sudden wake up in the next morning and your name is in the paper and you're going to a World Cup and you haven't really had game time with most of the players. It's a very daunting task for a player. You get there, you're worried if you're going to gel with the team, you're going to gel with the team structures, and you're not even concerned about performance yet. You're worried about those little things, and those do affect your performance. So definitely, I don't see how he can select close to the 30%, judging on who's been given a run and who hasn't been. So I think it's another area we're going to turn after the World Cup and say, well, let's get back to the boardroom, let's review the numbers. Don't be shocked if you get somebody mentioning, let's bring back the quota system, which I was totally against from the time I played rugby. We're failing to address the real essence of what transformation is. Transformation, at the end of the day, if we're truly transformed as a nation, should never be about the color of the skin of the person. It should be about the ability to do the job. And I do believe there are sufficient enough black players, up and coming as well, who can fulfill those roles with no issue about their skin color.
Thabiso, the last word will belong to you. Sure, the Springbok team isn't looking very good in terms of transformation under Heyneke Meyer, but there's another element here that would suggest that Meyer can only pick from the super franchises. Sure, you can pick from Japan and Europe, but most of the players come from the super franchises. We saw during Super Rugby, the Bulls played one match where they only had one non-white player in the starting 15. That doesn't help either, does it?
Well, I think the problem, and I think it's also important that we clear this up, that transformation, like Kaya said, it's not only about colour, but it's also not only at the Springbok level, it's also at the bottom. It's also in administration, also in the office. You know, you do have a mixture of administrators, but it's also at the bottom, because what we're seeing now in Cravenwick, that was played in Stellenbosch recently, they've got this unwritten rule where 9 players of colour must be in the teams. And it was only Western Province and Eastern Cape that actually had more than that. The other provinces were making sure that they just hit the 9 mark, and that's it. And look who made the final, Western Province and Eastern Province. I think Western Province had 12 and they thrashed them 95-0 in that final. But what's happening now is that you're seeing that there is a lack of black players in Cravenwick, which never happened before, which means that at the top they're killing the confidence of those coming through the system now, because those players are playing rugby and they realize that, no man, after high school I've got no chance in provincial rugby, because there's a big gap where we lose the players in high school and provincial rugby. And maybe Kaya can explain to us why, but there's a huge reason for that. And I think that's what's happening now, and that's what's killing our rugby now, that the lack of confidence from the top is killing it at the bottom. But I think the other problem that we have, and we need to talk about it here, is that the hotbed of black rugby in the Eastern Cape has also got a serious problem now. And we need to start asking questions about Chicky Watson now. Is he still the right man in charge? Look at the EP Kings when they turn out. I mean, that was not the plan of the EP Kings. They were supposed to have more black players in that system, in that team. But when they come out, they're all white, and you can identify with that. And we know that most of the talent is in the Eastern Cape. So let's also look at the Eastern Cape and what we're doing wrong in that region. Because if we get that region right, I think it will probably go around the country, you know, and send shockwaves around the country, and everybody will be encouraged. But if we don't get the Eastern Cape right, and if we don't ask questions now about Chicky Watson and his leadership qualities, and if he's still the messiah that we thought he was, you know, he's done a fantastic job back in the days. His son was fantastic, I mean, for rugby in this country. But now, what have we done? Where have we lost it? Because the EP Kings are not representatives of the province and the majority of the province, just like the Springboks, who are not representative of the demographics of the country. We look like a different country when the Springboks sing the national anthem, because they're not representative of the majority.
Gentlemen, I have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming in. Kaya Malotana, Thabiso Mosia.